When you're shopping for 3-row midsize SUVs and you want to spend big, like $60,000 big, try these two. 2025 Ford Explorer ST and the 2024 GMC Acadia Denali. At these prices, despite not being premium nameplates, they're offering a lot of luxury, a lot of room, a lot of technology that you've never seen either of these brands do before. Let's take a drive, let's go in and out so you can see all of the differences. The Explorer is in its 6th generation. It's been brand new since the 2020 model year, and it's gotten a refresh for 2025. The Acadia is in its 3rd generation, and it's new for 2024. The Explorer is more of the same formula. The Acadia is like nothing else the Acadia has ever been. The Explorer feels more like a car. It's very cosseting in here. It's almost like a Mustang. You feel lower, and it definitely feels sportier. It's not just the steering wheel, it's everything. For 2025, Ford has removed a lot of the hard plastic that dominated the Explorer's interior. There's now a soundbar. That's a Bang & Olufsen stereo that's fabric covered and integrated right into the dash. The console and the door panels are now softer, and the whole dash has been pushed forward for more space. There's also a new tray right here for a wireless charger, and it has a cooling pad, which the GMC does not have. It just makes everything more accessible. It feels like it's a little bit more basic in here, but I think it's more usable every day. Heated seats come standard, and on the ST and limited trims, you can get the active contour seats with 5 different massage modes and 3 different positions for the lumbar. They're definitely more supportive no matter how they're adjusted. Compared to the Explorer, the Acadia has about 2 inches of extra headroom and about 1.5 inches of extra legroom. GMC has done a very good job of making the new Acadia look more premium than it ever did, because it really never did. Now, there's heated seats, a heated steering wheel, wireless charging, and an 8-way power driver seat standard on every trim. And on the Denali, you're getting nicer leather, plus real wood. It really feels good. Got that nice matte finish, and all this cross-stitching all over the seats and the doors. I really like these light grays in the Acadia. You can't get that in the Explorer ST. On the Explorer Limited, you definitely can. You can dress it up pretty much just like this, but there's definitely a richer appearance inside this Acadia. The Explorer will seat 7 or 6, depending if you get these captain's chairs or the 2nd-row bench seat. The Acadia only offers the captain's chairs. And back here, you're getting heated seats, separate climate, power outlet, and side window shades. The Explorer's 2nd row, not quite as easy to adjust as the Acadia. You have to flip this top latch, and there's definitely not as much room here. The Explorer is also lower, so getting in with this opening, not quite as easy. In the Acadia, there's more than 3 inches of extra legroom versus the Explorer. However, if you do want a bench seat for 3, you cannot get that in the Acadia. This comes only as captain's chairs. To access the 3rd row, you press the button on the seat back here or on the side. Plenty of room to get back here with this extra wide door opening. The 3rd row seats only 2 across as opposed to 3, and I think that's better. There's actually equal legroom and about 0.7 of an inch more headroom, so that's good. But this bench is actually kind of angled this way, so I feel like I'm kind of diving forward. It's not really the greatest place to be, but it is decently spacious. The Acadia seats 3 across. I don't know how you could fit 3 of me back here, but the Explorer only does 2. There's USB-C ports on both sides, decent sized windows, and air vents right up here by your face. The Acadia wins on every cargo measure. Behind the 3rd row, behind the 2nd row, and when everything is folded. Almost 98 cubic feet compared to just over 85 on the Explorer. But you gotta bear in mind, the Explorer is already offering a ton of space, whereas over here, this is a plus-size mid-size 3-row. It feels almost full-size, and only the Toyota Grand Highlander matches the total cargo capacity. So you gotta ask yourself, do you really need all that space, or can you deal with just 85? It's up to you. The Ford Explorer has come a real long way. This looks better than a Land Rover. It's got a really nice chop roof effect. It looks classic, and for 2025, Ford didn't have to make too many changes. On the front, it goes from that 6-sided polygon to more of a, I would say a large tablespoon kind of shape. It looks good. I really liked how it looked before, but they did reduce the size of the headlights and the fog lights, so they're a little bit more cleaned up, a little sportier, dressier, you might say. On the ST, you're getting 21-inch wheels, and there's also an ST line. In case you don't want to pay for the big Turbo 6, you can get the 4-cylinder engine with all of this, including the red brake calipers and the upgraded performance brakes. Ford also lets you have for 2025 a black painted roof. Well, I wouldn't spend $5 grand to do that on this black one, but it is available on every other color. And across all the trims, I think it's the Explorer that just looks more athletic, it looks more streamlined, it really does look like, well, you're out to explore more. The GMC has a more kind of a limousine type of look. It's really much bigger than this. The Acadia does big pretty well. That's because it's echoing the styling of the Sierra pickup truck and the Yukon full-size SUV. No Acadia has looked this elegant and large before all at once. On 22-inch wheels on this Denali trim, just enough chrome trim, not too much. That grille is bright, and you can get very different designs across the lineup. Not quite as sporty as the Explorer, especially not in the ST trim. But over here, you're getting that beautiful blue paint on here. It truly is a brand new color that I actually like to see versus all the blacks. I like the cop look over here in the Explorer, but for luxury purposes, I'm gonna have to go with the GMC. It does not look ungainly, and really, Acadias have always looked like that, until now. The Explorer has a classic shape that has not gone out of style, and in this dark black, in ST trim, it's very stealthy. That's why the police love them so much, but they're not driving the ST with all this power and the quad exhaust tips. That's how you know it's a private individual that has one of these. Now for 2025, the taillights are a little different. If you notice, the turn signals and the backup lights, they're structured a little bit differently. They're now side by side, and there's now new LEDs connecting on the tailgate. That chrome strip is now gone. It's black no matter which trim you're choosing. I think that makes it look more elevated. It does look more expensive than before, but it really is the same vehicle. When I compare it to the Acadia, I prefer the Explorer. It's crisper, it's cleaner, it just lasts longer to me. Unlike that big chrome grille on the front, the back of the Acadia is a little cleaner and crisper. It actually hides a lot of the bulk because this is a much bigger vehicle than the Explorer. Not that much, but when you add a few inches here and there, it can tend to swell. And back here, they've reduced that. So the glass isn't so big, but you do have a lot of visibility. And while it doesn't have the same sharp angles as the Explorer, it still has nice quad exhaust tips, just enough chrome there, and just enough nice of that blue paint popping out. It's a much better look and way more refined than GMC has ever done on any Acadia. Is it better than the Explorer? Well, that's your opinion. I happen to like the Explorer a little better, but this one is really catching my eye, finally. Let's talk engines. The Ford has a large one, a 3-liter turbocharged V6 with 400 horsepower and over 400 pound-feet of torque. The GMC has a single engine across all of its trims. It's a 2.5-liter turbo inline 4 with over 320 horsepower and over 320 pound-feet of torque. Now the Explorer, you can also order it with a turbo inline 4, and the numbers are just slightly below that of the GMCs. But when you look at the fuel efficiency, the 6 is actually returning almost as good fuel economy as that 4, both in all-wheel drive trim. Now the major difference here between the all-wheel drive systems is that this is a rear-wheel drive car to start, this is front-wheel drive, and that's optional, right? You can get all-wheel drive as an option on pretty much every single trim. Towing is also an equal 5,000 pounds. For transmissions, 10-speed on the Ford and 8-speed on the GMC. And just in case you were looking for that Explorer hybrid, it's no longer available for 2025. And GMC doesn't offer one. There's a whole lot more power in the Explorer. For less money, you're getting a V6 engine, doesn't have to work as hard. And when you do want it to work, sure sounds a lot better. Some of the sound definitely is faked through these speakers. I'd say it's a good type of fakery. Just like the exhaust tips that aren't really exhaust tips, they route it down to the ground as opposed to out the back. But so what? 400 horsepower and a 10-speed automatic that for 2025, Ford says it recalibrated. What does that mean? I don't really know because they don't really offer any detail. But from the last time I tested an Explorer, I don't know, it was just fine before. Possibly a little quicker shifting, but really, this reminds me like an F-150 Raptor in terms of sound, in terms of response. Like, it's quick, it really is, and it doesn't really work as hard. The Acadia really buzzes a lot more because it has to. And when you compare the fuel efficiency between this bigger V6 and that smaller Turbo 4, given the weight and the box shape of these big SUVs, they're roughly the same. The Explorer is also quiet, just like the Acadia. And honestly, with these seats, I feel like they're more supportive. This one also has the optional massaging. It also has extra lumbar support in 3 different sections. And that's not something you're gonna get on the Acadia. I also just like how the steering tracks. It's just a little bit easier to drive on the highway. No matter what mode you're in, it's a little easier to adjust the modes too. Little dial here on the center console. When I drive the Explorer, everything is just a little bit more in reach. I like the fact that the screen, even though it's not as tall, has a lot of information right here, and I don't have to go looking far down like I do in the Acadia. That portrait screen is really nice, but at the same time, it can just make you feel like you really have to go up and down with your eyes, which when you're driving at 60 miles an hour, not really the best move. Similar to the Acadia, Ford has Blue Cruise. That's their hands-free driving system on marked highways. It works very much like the Acadia. However, I like how the Acadia has a light bar on the steering wheel. It tells you the active status. It goes from blue to green to red, depending on what the car is asking you to do. I think that's way better than just showing it in the dash. GM has some more practice with that than Ford, and I think it's a bit better executed. When you think three-row family SUV, you don't really think fun, ever. You think boredom and just driving for hundreds of miles straight until you have to stop for gas. Not so in this Explorer. The ST really has a worthy badge. The Ford Performance Badge, it actually applies to this really well. And it's not just the engine and the transmission tuning, it is the suspension itself. There's nothing trick going on here. There's no adaptive dampers even. But the way Ford has tuned it for better response without sacrificing a good ride, it's really good. And the steering is probably the best among all the SUVs in this class if you're going non-luxury. When I drive the Explorer, I've got a big vehicle behind me. This is like 85 cubic feet of total space, cargo space. It's massive, right? But it is a little smaller than the Acadia. And together with this suspension tune, this is truly the performance suspension versus what GMC calls performance suspension. I feel like I'm in a lower car. This feels like more like a sedan driving experience than a big SUV. And it's the suspension, it's also just the rear-wheel drive chassis. So many SUVs in the segment are front-wheel drive based, and that means inherently there's just always extra weight toward the front. This is more balanced, it's more even. It's why the center of gravity feels lower. It's why I just feel like I'm having a better time driving it. And to me, even if you don't like sporty driving and you don't care about that, it's the little things that matter because you just feel more confident, you feel like you're in more control. And the GMC's good, but this Ford really notches it up a bit. I guess that's why the cops like driving him so much. The other reason the Explorer drives so much better is that you don't have to use your right foot so much. The gearing and all the low-end torque makes this more effortless. It doesn't strain as much. And the Acadia, when you put your foot in it, yeah, it works fine. But you always feel like it has to work a lot harder. And the Explorer, you're working smarter. It's a bigger engine, it just helps. And the fact that you're not overpaying for this engine versus the GMC, that's where the value comes in, both in fuel efficiency, in terms of response, and really, it's more effortless. The Explorer drives more like a luxury SUV than that Acadia, for that alone. Where the Explorer really holds its own is the fact that it's a rear-wheel drive chassis, and that is stability control kicking in. It's not the chassis. Knowing the difference is why the Explorer will feel good when you're not driving like that, when you don't want to take corners that quick. And when you come to a stop, you feel like everything on this car is just built stronger. I like that. It just makes me feel like I'm safer in the car. The Acadia makes more noise, but it still moves. There's still a lot of power. You just have to dig into the throttle more. But once you're up and going, it's very comfortable. Straight line stability is great. It's about as quiet as the Explorer. I don't really have any issues with it. I just wish it sounded a bit better. But in terms of response, really no problem at all. And you have to remember how much larger the Acadia is. It's another 5 inches. The wheelbase is as big as a Chevy Tahoe. So in some ways, this shouldn't drive as well as the Explorer, but it's pretty close. The Acadia has Super Cruise. It's got a light right here in the steering wheel. On most marked highways, it works really well. I have found though, that when it automatically lane changes, it tends to be a little bit slow. You're still better off doing this all yourself, but it is impressive. A lot of the capability truly is. The Acadia can corner, but it doesn't have the steering feel or even the braking feel of the Explorer. GMC says there's a performance suspension. Whatever they did to it, I don't really know. Let's say they changed the dampers a bit versus a normal Acadia. It's good, but it's definitely not as fun to drive as that Explorer. Part of it is just the engine, right? It does not have the low-end torque of that bigger V6. But even if it was the 4-cylinder in the Explorer, it might be a little bit better matched in terms of power delivery. But the chassis, when I've driven the Explorer in any trim, it doesn't have to be the ST, because it's a rear-wheel drive chassis versus the front-wheel drive chassis of this Acadia, there's way more balance in the Ford. It wants to rotate a little bit more. Not that you want to rotate on a public road, but in terms of how these SUVs actually handle, the Explorer handles a lot more like a car. So you get a more like low to the ground experience. Here, you feel higher. I don't feel like I'm leaning all over the place because the body control is really good. But where the Explorer kind of digs back at you and wants you to go a little quicker, really tells you what's going on with the road, the Acadia mutes that. That's okay. This is really meant to be more of a luxury experience. But I do like the chassis more in the Ford. And while General Motors mostly has really good steering feel, this one's just okay. It's not quite as good as the smaller GMC Terrain. I was just expecting a little bit more connectedness. But everything is pretty fluid in here. And again, plenty of power. You just have to prod into the accelerator a bit more than the Ford. The transmission response is good. The Explorer lets you use the paddle shifters in any mode. On this GMC, you have to press an L button on the left of the steering wheel, and then you get to use the paddle shifters. I think that's a bit counterintuitive when you just want to press them and go. But the response on this 8-speed is good. It does not wait, it does not do anything like that. I would describe the Acadia as sure-footed and the Explorer as athletic. Kind of depends on which driving style you want. I think the Explorer, though, to me, feels a little bit more balanced, better in all worlds. The Acadia can handle its own on a back road, but like most bigger SUVs of this size, it drives larger and it feels larger at all times. Handling is not quite as snappy and sharp as the Explorer, and neither are the brakes, really. Like, they feel good, but not quite as confidence-inspiring as what you'll find in that Explorer. The Explorer has a 13.2-inch touchscreen, also running native Google OS. So you get the maps, works really nicely. I like the fact that this is a widescreen. It's not taking as much of the dash, so it's actually a little less intimidating to use. There's nothing that you can swipe down, but from here, you get the climate controls with this strip that goes across here. Not quite as easy to use as you might think sometimes, because sometimes you're kind of going to the map, right? But then you might adjust the fan speed by mistake. So those are little kind of quibbles that I don't like, but everything else is pretty cool. You got their ambient lighting here. You can see your tire pressure there, adjust the seats, put the massage. And the settings are actually easier than in the Acadia because you can always see the sub-menu, right? You see something to the left and to the right. And I think this is just laid out better. It's faster and it just has a little bit better legibility. And when you're parked, you can hook up a Bluetooth controller and play a racing game with a Ford Shelby and race in New Zealand against Camaros, right? You can do all that with a controller. It's kind of cool that it's here. There's other apps from the Google Play Store. Kind of gimmicky, but there's definitely a lot of processing power here. And overall, I do like the fact that this is a tidier display. It's actually still really easy to use, but not quite as big and large as that Acadia. Digital instrument panel also comes standard on the Explorer. And there's some decent adjustments that you can do straight from the steering wheel. So there's more functionality here than the GMC. There's also full screen maps, or actually 2/3 screen maps. But I like that. See all your information here at a glance. Now it doesn't do as much as you'll find in, say, an F-150 Raptor, which has a ton more gauges on it. But when you select the drive modes, you get nice little animations here. Sport, of course, my favorite. But I like that you can adjust more of the functionality here from the steering wheel, and you cannot do that as much in the Acadia. Every Acadia comes with this 15-inch portrait display. It's all touch, save for this volume knob here, and a row of toggle switches for the climate controls. It runs quickly. It runs Google natively, so you get the maps, you get Google Assistant, the Play Store, and other GM vehicles just like this works pretty well. It's just a different orientation here, a lot more space. Now the cameras don't particularly look really good on this display. I just think because it's way more high res than the cameras are. These are okay, but they could be a little bit better considering the size of this screen. However, there are some major usability issues. For example, the headlights. They're down here, and then it pops up here. That might not seem like a big deal, but try to adjust it when the vehicle's off and the screen is off. Not good. There's also a row of blank switches here. They're not actually switches, but they're blank. For example, the auto high beams will be here, and then you start to drive and it will disappear. I don't really understand that. For example, the heated seats. See, you want to press it down here. Well, now you have to go up to then see what is going on down here. Same with the fan direction. I have to go all the way up here. That really does not make a lot of sense. I don't like this layout. So it does look cool, but it also smudges extremely easily. And because the typefaces and the icons are so thin, it can be washed out in a hurry. I do like the interface. It's generally fast and all that, but really it looks cool. I don't think it operates as cool every single day. It's not as easy to use. A digital instrument panel comes standard with 3 views, including full screen maps, 1 for driver assist, and the main display. The only thing you can change is the portion on the left. So you could add transmission fluid temperature, all sorts of things, but you have to do it from the main touchscreen. There's no thumb controls for that. The only thing you can do here is really just answer calls, and also for radio favorites. I wish GM had some more functionality here because it is a crisp and bright display. The Explorer starts around $40,000. There's 4 trims. Ours was the ST with the Sun and Sound package. With Destination, it was about $61,000. The GMC Acadia starts around $43,000. There are 3 trims. We tested a Denali with the Reserve package and Super Cruise for around $65,000. The GMC has glitz and glam, the Ford nails the fundamentals, and by that, it's a sharper, better driving SUV. The technology is more approachable, it's more powerful, and to more buyers, I think it suits more people. Unless you truly, truly need the extra space in that Acadia, because it's massive. For less money, I think the Explorer really does it, and in this trim, especially on the ST, for around $60K, it's delivering a real premium feel from a non-premium nameplate. What do you think? You want some more SUV comparisons? We got them on the CarGurus channel, so subscribe and we'll see you next time.